Hello everyone, and welcome back to Factorio C Block. I'm Bobbin, you're watching episode 9, and we're looking at the metals production that I set up in the last episode. I should probably mention that a great deal of time has passed since the last episode. I have not been running around building things and expanding the base, but I did do some rearranging like I talked about. I also did quite a bit of planning and some calculations, and a little tweaking and correction of errors and stuff along the way. So let's take a look at this metals production. The things that I have done with it since the last episode, I did go and I found an error. I was not properly routing my sulfuric wastewater over to this hydro plant that's cleaning it up. And so I did have to go ahead and put in a line to do that. That got done. It started working just fine. And what I have found is that originally I anticipated that this process was going to be sulfur negative. That was based on prior experience. It turns out not to be the case. This is in fact a sulfur positive process. It keeps generating extra sulfur and I have to come over here and pull it out. That's a little bit of an annoyance. It means I'm going to have to change this mechanism right here. Instead of bringing in sulfur, I'm going to need to remove it. I'll just go ahead and do that right now. I'll come over here and remove these belts and that box. And I guess the way to do this is going to be something like, let's see, let's just put the box right here, and then we will take and come out there and ship it off into there. And now this box can accumulate a lot more sulfur than this machine can. If the machine fills up on sulfur, it will stop and everything will grind to a halt. That'll give me more time on this. It's a pretty slow gain, but it is a real gain. I think this whole mechanism is going to be replaced pretty soon with, it's not going to be replaced. What's going to happen is it's going to be moved in a particular kind of way, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. I did go and add in, like I had mentioned before, a mechanism of pulling the crushed stone out, and it's getting converted into mineralized water, which is going down and feeding the algae farms. This up here is pretty temporary. I needed a source of alginic acid for making circuits, these little basic circuit boards, and so I did just go ahead and set something up here. It's using the waste saline from this process. Now the metals production process has been going at a pretty good clip for a long time. Right now we've only got 2 of these operating because these chests with lead and tin have filled up to the point that I'm allowing them to fill. I want to emphasize more useful metals, and for now that means iron, really. Copper is getting close to full over here. Iron, not so much. Okay, the other thing that I did over here was I found... can I get down there? I got to squeak through, but the positioning on that was giving me some trouble. You will notice down here that slag is actually backed up. I could be producing more metal if I simply had built more facilities for it. And I'm going to do that pretty soon. I don't know if I'm going to do it in this episode or not. There's a lot to talk about before I actually start building anything. But if we build something in this episode, we might get to that. If not, I'll do it between episodes. But I want to expand this out a little bit so that I get another column of these and I can produce more ores. The other thing is I found that when it was in this situation like it's in right now, where it's not producing anything on this side, I found that this side was not actually fully able to exploit the materials that were coming in, because apparently, although the ratios sort of check out, this is producing, let's see, 1 to 1 to 2. It may be that there's a difference in the speeds. Crafting speed 1.5, crafting speed 1.5, 1.5. So no. But although the ratios check out, I found that the pipes were not staying full here. So I went ahead and bridged the 2 sides, both before the crystallizers and before the filtration units, so that everything would just sort of if this side was running a little low, this side would assist it, that sort of thing. Okay, so the other thing that you've probably already seen if you're looking really closely is that I expanded my production of algae again. We're now up to 8 algae farms. Between episodes, that is going to expand to 12. I've got 6 of them running pretty much all the time right now. We're using about 5.5 megawatts on an ongoing basis. It has been as high as 8. I've been watching it really closely. I'm having a little trouble watching from production. I mean, you can come over here to the production window and pick, let's say, carbon. It's kind of blinking around there. We got carbon and carbon. And you can sort of see that it's consuming more than it's producing. It's a little hard to judge from that because some of the carbon is still being moved around manually over to these furnaces instead of going out on belts and being completely backlogged and automated. So the production numbers there are a little iffy. I have not been seeing any shortage of carbon at all. I've still only got one of these liquefiers making carbon, and it is staying backstuffed. But I think it's actually getting pretty close, and I'm going to have to make another one of these. So when I put in 4 more algae farms over here, I'll probably put in 1 more of these modules out here. And I've already got the space for this one. I'm going to make some more space over there to deal with that one. Since we are using more power, I did go ahead and put in a 5th steam engine down here. So we're going nicely there. So that's sort of what's going on there. I do have some green circuits that I made. I'm up to 27. I've been using some of them. I've got assembling machines 2s. I've actually handcrafted, it looks like 80 green science packs. We are going to look a little more at research in just a little bit. One other thing on the algae farms here is I upgraded the assembling machines on the algae farms to assembling machine 2s. They are more productive, and that keeps me from having backups on cellulose fiber, which is what I was having before. So we're getting faster wood pellet output from the same number of farms. That's very helpful. One of the things I mentioned I was going to do was I was going to rearrange my slag production, and I did. We have a new arrangement over here. What I found, this is actually the second rearrangement of it. The first rearrangement of it, I sort of like added some more and spaced things out, and I found that I was just having a lot of trouble. It was getting very messy over here trying to get crushed stone in to make landfill and stone. So what I ended up doing was I came over here and moved everything back, and I put it in a sort of a block formation here. This is very spaced out. It's not a great arrangement for running through if you don't have squeak through. It does, however, sort of minimize some of the complexity with the pipes. They look pretty complicated, but really I've just got a line of oxygen coming out, a line of hydrogen coming out, a line of water coming out, and each side shares with another side. So that's actually working pretty well. I've got a blueprint for this so I can expand it nicely. When I get ready to put down 2 more of them, I can just like line up right there and stamp down 2 more of them. Same thing down here. So I'm pretty good on that. I'm up to 10 electrolyzers, and they're definitely not being fully utilized at this point because you can see really bad stuff here. On the mineral water situation, what I've got set up here on the splitters is this one's a priority splitter, so it sends slag to mineral water production first. But the mineral water production, this is a top-off system, so wastewater gets priority on going onto the bus here. And this is running a fair amount, but a lot of the mineral water that's being used is in fact coming from waste. And it's coming from this one and these 2, or this plant right here, the sulfur plant. So I'm getting some good use out of that, recycling my materials. I guess, as the song says, the secret to survival is knowing what to throw away and knowing what to keep. Basically, the more we keep, the better off we are. Going through here, landfill, I've limited it to making, there's 1,000 in here and 1,000 backstuffed in the machine, so it's keeping 2,000 landfill on hand. Considering it's backstuffed, I could probably have put more in there. And I guess that's mostly it. I have set up down here a little planning for doing brick production. Brick production is something we're going to need very soon. I did a little rearranging here to make things a little neater. I don't think this is going to stay here because of what we're going to talk about in just a minute if I've got my agenda set up right, and I think we do. But for now, this is laid out a little closer to what it needs to be. I do want to set up some more production down here below it. I've allowed for space. I think I know what's going to go in there, but I haven't really set it up yet. There's some more research I want to do. So let's go look at research, because we're going to need to start some new research. And there are a couple of things I want to talk about along the lines of research. One of them is I want to be able to do green research, and to be able to do green research, I'm going to have to upgrade this lab. Obviously, at some point, we have to go and put labs on the belt and have really fully automated production of everything. We are still not at that point yet because we're sort of research starved, or not research starved, resource starved. And I have to do a little more planning out on the base and get some more construction going before we're ready to change that. That said, I do want to do minimal amounts of green research, and this lab will not do it. The electromagnetism lab is for red-only research. To get the next tier of research, we need to build a new lab, and that's done right here. We're going to build an electrochemics lab. And it looks like I don't have steel in my inventory for that, but I do have some steel made over here. So let's make an electrochemics lab, just one for now. It's going to be slow, but we'll deal. So it's going to start that. While that's making, I want to look at something else. These are my 3 available assembling machines. We have the original assembling machine 1, we have the assembling machine 2, and we have the electronics assembling machine 1. Now, the original assembling machine 1 uses 100 kilowatts of power and has a crafting speed of 0.5. It is also limited to recipes that only have 2 components. If we move over to the assembling machine 2, it uses 135 kilowatts of power, so a 35% increase in power consumed. But it has a crafting speed of 0.75, so a 50% increase in crafting speed, which actually does mean that it's able to produce things more efficiently. It's able to produce them for less energy, assuming that it's running full time. If it's not running full time, it also has a third higher, or a half higher drain, I think. A third higher looks like. Something like that. Okay. The electronics assembling machine 1, it's got a smaller footprint. It's 2x2. That is helpful for making compact designs. It's less helpful if you really need to use a lot of inserters to push stuff in and out of it. So do keep in mind it has a small downside. It uses 100 kilowatts of power, the same as the lower tier assembling machine, and it has a crafting speed of 1, so it's actually the fastest of these 3 machines. The downside to it is it's limited to just a handful of recipes. It can do the basic electronics like circuit production and some of the Bob's electronics stuff, but one other thing that it can do that is going to be very useful here is it can do the subcombines for the research packs. So I'm going to be using this machine for that because it will use less power and it will do it faster. So let's go ahead and pick that up. I think I have another one in here. No, I just have one. I'm going to want 2. So let me go ahead and make another one. And I'm going to replace these 2 assembling machine 1s with electronics assembling machine 1s. And we're going to set them to make respectively the electromagnetic core and the electromagnetic coils that are required for Tier 1 research packs. And I'll go ahead and put my already made ones in there so that they don't sit in my inventory. So we can now move these up and put them here. Now the other piece of this, of course, is this machine right here. This is the older, slower one, and it is making the research kit. We can't actually make the research kit in one of these. It only makes the subcombines, but we can go ahead and upgrade this to an assembling machine too. So we'll put that there, and we'll have an assembling machine too. The lab has finished, so I'm going to go ahead and put it down there. This one has more slots. It takes the red one, which is the sacrificial electromagnet. It takes the green one, which is the single-use Atmos set. And it also takes this other green one, the dark green one if you want, the optimized biome planner that's used for some of Angel's bioprocessing research. Eventually. We'll get to that. We're not doing it just yet. Or we actually are going to do it, but it's going to be stuff that's preliminary to using this kit. Now, since I have a bunch of these green kits made, I'm going to stick them in here. That'll just get them out of my inventory. I'm not going to do any green research today. But let's go ahead and set this up to make the sacrificial electromagnet, and we're done with this setup. Let's go ahead and string some power over here because I'm about to start some research. So I'll just bring it all the way across here. There we go. So this is now mostly powered. I'm going to have to put a power pole in the middle here to catch those inserters. Let's take a look at the research cube because there are, well, first of all, let's go and look in the basic research screen. There are a few things that I want to talk about just a little bit on here. I want to talk about the particular research that's about to be a priority. The biggest one, and the one that I want to start right away, is it's not showing up here. I'll go ahead and go into research queue to start that one. I want to start the Factorissimo research. If you have not used Factorissimo before, what this does is it allows you to build factory buildings. And a factory building is a building that is, it's a bit like a TARDIS, except it doesn't move around, at least not on its own. It's a building that's bigger on the inside than on the outside. You can go and the whole, like for example, the smallest one is 7 by 7 on the outside and 30 by 30 on the inside. And so you can go and plop one of those down somewhere and you can just walk into it and you've got a concrete floor that you build stuff on. And when you go and build stuff on this floor, the whole floor is powered, assuming that the building is connected to power. So you don't need any power poles or anything. If you've got the appropriate technology, it's all lit up, so you don't need any lights. But you can basically set a sort of mini production facility inside that as long as it fits in 30 by 30. And there are ports on the outside of it that allow you to bring materials in and export materials out. We're actually going to want to do liquids as well. So when I click this, it's going to go ahead and start. We're going to have stone walls as a preliminary, then architecture, which is the base research that lets you build a building, and then fluid connections, which lets you bring fluids in and out of the building. We're also going to want the lights, so I'll add that. We're going to need optics for that. So it's going to do these 5 researches. I will mention that the architecture ones are pretty expensive. 200 packs for architecture 1 and 100 for the fluid connections. But that's going to set it up. Now, for those of you who are at least passingly familiar with it, I will go ahead and say, if you're thinking, oh no, he's cheating again, sort of, I guess. I mean, it's a very helpful mod to have. That's probably the best way of putting it. Whether it's cheating or not depends on what you consider cheating, obviously. One thing that you are not getting a benefit from here that might seem like a benefit is it's not a cheap way to make new building space. Now you might think, well, it's bigger on the inside than on the outside, so if I put this down, I get all that extra space for free. Well, the cost of the building is a lot more than the cost of the landfill that would make that same amount of space in the outside world. So just sort of dismiss from your mind the possibility that the advantage of this is creating more land, because that's just not true. The real advantage, it's got a bunch of them. Probably the biggest one is that it lets you compress your base. It lets you put more production into a smaller area so that when you run belts on the outside, when you run robots on the outside, all of these things have shorter distances to travel. It also means that you can rearrange the stuff on the inside without actually having to make additional space on the outside, provided that you already had the extra space on the inside to begin with. Eventually you can start nesting these buildings, and I might use that a little bit. It's not something that I'm going to use a great deal. In principle, we could take and put this whole base in one building eventually with enough research. That is just not how I typically use it. I might use it a little bit. But one example of a use for it would be over here where we've got the steam engines. We could take and put our steam setup inside a building. We could take over here and put this whole facility right here inside a building, and it's sort of isolated from the rest of the base in a way. You define the inputs and the outputs and decide how to deal with it. It's sort of like a base within a base, basically. One thing we can put in it, and I will, and this is probably one of the things that looks the most outrageous right away, is I'm probably going to put all my windmills inside a building. Obviously, in the real world, putting windmills inside a building makes no sense at all. The wind doesn't blow inside buildings. And the buildings themselves are coded so that you can't put solar power in them, at least not and get any benefit from it. But realistically, it's just a way of packaging it up. And I don't see that as being a major problem. So we're just going to take and package up the windmills probably and put them inside a building. That way I don't have to worry about moving them around, getting them out of the way, that sort of thing. Another place where you could use one of these buildings would be up here, like the sulfur plant. I probably will take and put the sulfur plant inside a building, and then I can make it bigger without taking any extra space, as long as I can still keep it within 30 by 30. I can also put like sulfur storage in it, that sort of thing. On the other hand, there are other things like this, like all these algae farms. This is already too big to go in the basic Factorissimo building. So if I put this in a building, it would have to be a smaller chunk of it, and I probably wouldn't do that. I'll probably just keep it outside. Same thing over here for the electrolyzers. You can put electrolyzers in a building, and I think this would probably fit inside a building. I haven't counted all the spaces, but I think it would. But I think I'm better off leaving it outside and just expanding it as I go. Okay, so next bit to talk about on research. As I have mentioned before, one of my goals on the research is to look at things that give me efficiency gains before looking at things that give me just productivity gains without efficiency, or just nice things to have. The Factorissimo buildings are a little bit of a, they fall into that last category, but I do consider them pretty high priorities because they make me more efficient as a player. That said, mostly I'm interested in productivity efficiency. I want to be able to produce more with less because we have a very limited supply here. And so there are a couple of researches in particular that I want to look at for that. One of them is coal processing. Coal processing 2. This research will allow me to make charcoal pellets. I've already discussed the benefit of charcoal pellets. They are a compact source of fuel, and they don't require carbon dioxide to make, unlike the carbon. They give the same basic energy gain as going to carbon, but they don't require as many inputs, so they are more efficient. To get that, I'm going to have to do quite a bit of green research. I'm going to have blue algae processing, gas processing, oil processing, advanced chemistry 1, and then I can get coal processing. So I've got to do quite a lot of research in the green stuff to do that. And so I'm going to be hand making a lot of these green science packs probably. I might set up a production line for them. It's probably not going to be top priority because I can just always have some sort of handcrafting going on to deal with that sort of thing for a while. But that's going to be one of the highest priorities. Now, one of these intermediate ones is also highly valuable, and you might be thinking, oh, oil, let's go for that. Obviously, I have to go for oil processing at some point, and gas processing, really. I'm going to need all of these researches. But if I were to go oil processing right now, I wouldn't have anything to do with most of the liquids. And so there would be a lot of building storage facilities and all that. And I don't want to do that. But one of the valuable ones here is the advanced chemistry. And the reason it's useful along the way is because it will let me make the electrolyzer Mark II, which has a 50 kilowatt increase in power. So that's basically a 1/6 increase in power, and it increases the crafting speed by 50% for that. So that will dramatically increase the amount of slag that we're producing for the power we're putting in. It does require one component that I don't have yet, which is clay bricks, which means that in addition to this, I'm going to have to get washing too, which also requires green research, but that will get me limestone, which will be the final component that I need for the bricks. I'm going to set up clay bricks pretty soon, but I do need this technology first. The other major efficiency technology, so that's two of them really, although they all sort of come in a line, so researching one will imply getting both of them. The other one is steel. So I'm going to want advanced steel smelting. And the reason I want this is you have to have this in order to cast steel plates. You can make with the advanced iron smelting, which is a prerequisite to this, I believe. You can make steel ingots, but steel ingots are useless unless you can put them into plates. So while this is just a red technology and will let you make steel ingots, you're going to have the one that's red and green in order to make any plates out of it. But this plate production process is considerably more efficient in producing steel, and so that will allow me to stretch out my iron supplies. Along the way, I am going to have to do researches in metallurgy and this iron smelting, and I'll probably do the copper smelting as well, because that will allow me to increase my metal production slightly more while saving on steel. I'll have to do sorting to get that, and I already have the technology for ore sorting. It's pretty common that you hear people go and say that ore sorting requires all sorts of additional technology before it gives any benefit over just basically smelting saprolite. And there's a lot of truth to that. If we actually look at the efficiency of this process right here, we are producing 1 iron plate for every 3.75 slag that we put into the process. And it's hard to get better than that for a while. But if instead of looking at iron plates, you look at total plates, and you use the tier 1 casting, which is just the first tier of it, nothing complicated beyond that, you do get an efficiency improvement. It does require that you're sort of wanting a particular ratio of iron to copper, but our initial ratio is 2 iron plates to 1 copper plate, and that is pretty good for a while. I don't think we're going to be storing up a lot of extra plates that way that I just can't figure out what to do with all these extra plates. Especially, and when you look at research, the first research tier, the red science packs, requires that ratio, 2 iron to 1 copper. Now the second tier puts more emphasis on copper, so you can't think of it quite that way, But do realize that you've got buildings going on, and you're going to start consuming a lot of steel, and that's an iron hog, and so still your iron usage should probably be quite a bit heavier than your copper usage. So I'm not worried about getting buried in iron plates just because I need to produce all sorts of extra iron to get enough copper to get by. That is what is on the agenda today. Just a discussion of the technology. I'm not going to queue up the next tiers of technology, but I probably am going to research them in between episodes. What I'm sort of going to plan on doing with technology is I will just let you know at the beginning of the episode what was researched since the prior episode. Let's see what else I have on my agenda here. Really, that's about it for this episode. It's not going to be a long episode. I'm mostly just going to talk about stuff. In the next episode, we are going to do some expansion. There's not going to be as much time passing between episodes on this next one. This one really, I think probably 10 to 12 hours has passed. A lot of it has just sort of passed while I was editing and uploading videos and that sort of thing. So I wasn't really paying attention playing the game. A lot has sort of changed, but not really. I could have been building out new builds and making new production chains and all that. There is going to be some of that between episodes for expanding this, but any sort of new production change I will try to catch on camera for the first time that I do it. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.